Hi, this is Judah from SceneForge Studio, and this video is going to be kind of an informal devlog, build-along type thing. It shouldn't be that long, but I kind of want to just explore, I guess along with you guys, what SceneForge can currently do, and try to create something cool just on video. So with that being said, this is a scene that I constructed using some Sketchfab models. We have a camera here. The scale is a bit off in this scene, but you know, for what we're doing, it works pretty well. We have some lights. We have a color light checker, this guy I downloaded, as well as some toys here that are just on the floor. Some cars, blocks, little R2 from previously, and this monkey whose materials didn't import properly. But in any case, we have an interesting scene here. And we have this building like this, and I actually placed panel lights inside the window panes. So you actually get somewhat realistic light direction coming from where the light actually would. And what's interesting is that because this model doesn't have back faces, meaning that you can see through it, you know, on all the other sides, when I change the time of day, on the inside, the light changes as well, which obviously is not super realistic, but it can have some interesting effects, as you can see here. I happen to really like the way you see the light shadowing the rest of the scene, you know, through like these slats in the ceiling. But let's leave it something like, I'll leave it as it was before, like kind of like that. So we have something here that's very like dark and moody, with these lights coming in, a lot of bloom. The toys, I'm gonna turn on VSync, and our color light checker. It looks pretty cool. You see we have the reflections in the bulbs over there, and yeah. So I'm gonna start from scratch and build something else kind of cool. But I wanted to start by just taking some photos of this and kind of adding them to storyboard mode so we can create a storyboard later on. So to do that, I'm actually going to use the virtual camera app because it allows me to get much more realistic looking shots. Even though they're still images, I feel that it has that, I don't know, just being able to actually control the camera with my hands just makes it feel so much more hands-on, which is cool. So we're going to use the virtual camera app, except the one I'm going to use right now is on an iPad Pro. Now previously I didn't talk about that it's available for iOS. It's not, but this is a test build that hopefully, once Apple approves the build, should be available in the next coming weeks or so. So it's available on all iOS devices that use ARKit. I find that ARKit, Apple's tracking, Apple's AR system is much more accurate and much more fluid, I suppose, than Google's AR Core. So you can keep that in mind when working between devices. But either way, both devices, Android and iOS, will work totally fine. So I actually already have this enabled, so I'm just going to click resume, and now it should jump to where my iPad is. Now I'm using a rig. This is a iPad mount from Small Rig. I find that having these two handles really just, it makes it so much easier to control. So this is currently calibrated that to my right is the forward of the scene, but I can recalibrate it if necessary. I'm going to leave it like this because sometimes the tracking will get confused if it's pointing at another screen. So here we have our toys over here. Now I'm going to turn the focus distance to 0, so it'll automatically focus on the center of the screen, and I can adjust the zoom on the iPad. So let's get a couple of interesting shots of the toys on the ground. Now, of course, with physical camera tracking, you do get the real jitter that comes with an actual camera, but again, I really think it adds to the process. And I'm going to change the focus distance manually. Awesome. So we can get, it's actually very far away, so I'm going to manually tap to focus on it. There we go. Let's get a snapshot of our dude here. And let's zoom out. Get a wide shot of our scene. Now the focus distance is all the way in the back, so the entire scene should be in focus. Cool. So you can imagine that when filming videos, this really just adds to the sensation of actually filming something for real, which is really cool. I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to pause the tracking, so now we now have regular desktop control. So I'm going to go to storyboard mode, and I'm going to build a very basic storyboard. So as I mentioned before, all of these shots here are taken from the entire project. So you see we have these other shots that were taken in another scene that I can switch to. It just makes it easier for constructing storyboards from different locations. So I'm going to make it look, I suppose, like this guy just came in. It's unusually dark for some reason, but I think that's okay. He looks at the toys. Then we can pan over to color light checker, and we'll get a wide shot of the room. So I'm not going to add much of a description because this isn't much of a story, but as you can see here, we kind of have something basic. Now you can see this car over here that is actually a DeLorean is looking very white from certain angles. That's a bug that we're aware of and trying to fix as hard as we can. It's a weird way with some of the materials interact with the actual sky system. It's being worked on, so that's why it's a little annoying right now. So we have this storyboard like that. I'm going to make sure to save my project. And I'm going to create a new scene. I'm going to call this gallery scene, I suppose. Alright, so here we have a brand new scene. I'm going to change the time of day so we can actually see what we're doing. There's currently no ground material, so I'm going to make this concrete and change the scale to something like 2000. So I hope to do these like videos, maybe even live streams, just because it's fun to kind of talk through my process. I don't get to do that, so it being recorded is interesting to look back on. Alright, so now we have just a very blank scene. If I go to the library, I imported this strange object. It kind of looks like a, I don't know, some sort of kitchen appliance, but it's actually a huge round room. Make this much smaller. That I believe the purpose of it is to be like a museum gallery, but like in space. I don't really know, but it is highly reflective. You can see the windows, and it has this really cool light at the top. Just like before, it doesn't have back faces, so light will shine through from outside, but I think for this case it's okay. I'm going to turn on ray trace reflection, so you see already it looks very cool, especially these windows. And what's cool is that these windows also, they're not transparent, but they use the reflections from outside. So as I change the time of day, it almost looks like you can see through them, but it's just very foggy. But it's actually the reflection of directly across from it, which is outside. If that makes any sense, I'm not really sure. So we have this environment here. It's very cold. It's very like industrial almost. So I'm going to do something like this. And we're going to add some lights. Now you might be thinking it doesn't need that much light, and that's true because we can see the entire thing, but adding lights will make it feel much more like it's tangible almost, having light sources from inside as opposed to just flat global lighting. I'm going to go to the sky settings. I'm going to turn on clouds and sun shafts. And adjust the move speed, coverage, and I'll set to a certain cloud preset, and that's why you can't see it, because the cloud quality is very low. There we go. So being able to see through this skylight I find that really cool. It just adds a lot to it. So we have here, and I'm going to go to lights. I'm going to add a panel light, and I'm just going to put this right in the window just to see how that looks. By default, it jumps all the way to the far left on the temperature scale, so let's make that a little warmer, or a little less warm, I suppose. Going to enable indirect lighting. Now this is very intense, so with indirect lighting turned on, you usually can turn down the intensity while still having that nice bright effect. Now I obviously don't like the way it looks just floating on the wall, but that's why we're probably going to photograph it from the other side. And I am going to turn on bloom just a little bit. And of course we need a virtual camera, so I'm going to lights camera, let's use a free camera. You can see already how reflective the floor actually is. And once we bring in a camera, because the reflections do update with camera motion, or at least it should if I turn it on, they could update a lot more frequently, as you can see here. Sometimes it's a bit jarring, especially because we're inside a large reflective room, I suppose, so it's going to be updated and it's going to look a little jarring because the reflections are coming from all sides. So I actually am going to turn this off. But now I can go in here, make the focal length something more usable, and just see where we are. Alright. There's actually a chance I'm outside the building. There we go. Alright, this is cool. This is interesting. So I can like imagine this being like some sort of creepy art gallery. I just realized there's no doors. Is this an elevator, I suppose? Oh, I guess it's an elevator. Interesting. I'm not a fan of that. Very claustrophobic, but it's interesting. I can imagine like a lot of like art on the walls and this being some sort of creepy, super fancy gallery. I don't know. So let's go to the library and see what else we got here. We can bring in our guy, make him much smaller. This is always good to get a sense of what human scale is, what human height is. So we could use the ruler and actually measure it. Inches doesn't do much for me because I don't know what that actually converts to. Alright, so he's 2 feet tall. So obviously the scale is not quite right. For us right now, I'm not going to put too much thought in it. But when working with real lights and cameras and stuff, you're definitely going to want to, especially when you're actually doing live compositing, you're going to want to make sure everything's at least at a reasonable scale. Alright, so we have our guy here. He looks like someone who would be at one of these art galleries. And I'm going to add 10 of them because it'll make it feel so much more alive by having people here. So I'm just doing Control D to duplicate. It's just a very common keyboard shortcut, so I figured I would keep it like that. And let's actually put one inside the elevator. If I can even figure out how this works. I guess this could be a shrinking device in this strange world we're creating. It's like they're all standing around and observing this guy who was put into this machine and got shrunken down. That's good enough. This is really ridiculous. Alright, so we have something here. It's weird, but it's something. And what else do we got? I'll bring in the color light checker because I always think it's cool to have a super, super reflective surface like the reflection ball. Especially seeing it reflected on the ground. It's just cool. I don't know, to me at least. And we have some other stuff that wouldn't really be appropriate in this room, like the toys. So what we're going to do is go to Sketchfab. Now, I'm using the website, but in the future, and this is something that I'm actually super excited about, is in the future, built into SceneForge, there will be a window. You open it up, log into your Sketchfab account, and you can download and import stuff directly into SceneForge with little to no hassle. So rather than having to do the whole annoying process that you're going to see me do right now, it's a 2-click solution, and it basically gives the feel that included with SceneForge is over 300,000 completely free models without the huge file size. It just makes it super easy for everyone to get started prototyping their shots without having to worry about a huge library being included with it. So I'm going to search for art. I know that's very generic. I'm going to make sure this is downloadable and make sure I can actually use it for this purpose. Of course, I'm going to put a link to all the credits in the description. So let's find something interesting. This is a statue. I like that. And does this have a stand? No, it'd be cool if it had a stand. We can put it on some sort of dresser. So Sketchfab is cool because there are full rooms, as you can see here. This, I believe, is just a photo scan of like an actual museum. So you can get just full scans of rooms, like from actual museums and stuff, that can serve as virtual film sets in and of themselves, and it's really cool. And really useful for just getting started and making something cool. Even here, we have a photo scan of like this corner alley. You can just use that as is, and it's great. All right, I'm actually going to search for just a painting. Perfect. This is the painting. All right. So it's also important to always look at the triangles and vertices, just because the more triangles you have, the more triangles are going to be in your scene, and it has the higher potential to slow it down. So I'm going to download this in GLTF, and I'll download this statue. What's the poly count? Okay, so it's 100,000 vertices, 200,000 triangles. So this is definitely a photo scan, but you know what? It's pretty cool, so I'm going to use it. This is actually from the Minneapolis Institute of Art. So a lot of like real institutions include scans of their library, which is cool. And this is in the public domain. That's awesome. Download that, and I'm going to search for one more thing. I'm going to search for counter. Some sort of old wooden counter. I'm not going to put a bar in the museum, but... Or like a bench, like an old bench. Or a piano. That's what I want. I want like a grand piano. Let's see. Is this downloadable? And this one comes with a bench. Awesome. Marble stone version. Already you can tell this video is very informal, but it's fun. And hopefully this will give you some idea as just the overall process of using the software, if anyone is watching this at all. This has 1.3 million triangles. Let's go to the other one. Significantly less. Oh, this is not really... This is kind of ugly. So let's go to this wood one. Non-commercial share, like, fine. It's always important to look at what the licensing information is. For this case, this is fine, but always make sure to take a look at that. So now I have our 3 models here. Now I have my downloads folder pulled up, and I will show that. And by default, Sketchfab has zip files. I think I talked about this in a previous video, so I'm just going to zip through the process. No pun intended. Someone asked me on TikTok, as much as I hate to say that phrase, what operating system I'm using. I'm using Windows 11, which has its own quirks in and of itself, such as Explorer being incredibly slow. That being said, I just love the way Windows will adapt to the colors. It's just cool. Alright, so we have our piano. I'm going to put this in the 3D models folder of the project. Alright, delete that. Let's get our giant statue and our Mona Lisa. Alright. And let's bring that in there as well. Cool. Hopefully this isn't too boring. Alright. So let's start with the biggest model. I believe that is the big statue. So I'm going to go to my 3D models. I think I put the statue accidentally in this radio station. There we go. Statue. So we can leave everything as is. Now this might take quite a while. So never mind. Take that back. And there was no cuts in that. Alright, so let's bring this in. That is really cool. So already you can kind of see, as I mentioned before, because Sketchfab is just a bunch of stuff that people published, I can't vouch for the quality of the models. So for example, as you can see on my mouse cursor, the pivot point is frustratingly nowhere near the actual model. So that's something we're working on, like a tool that you can basically just click anywhere on the model and move it from there. Should be relatively simple to implement, but there are other things that are prioritizing right now. So I'm going to just place this on the ground. And see, now it's annoying. In order to rotate it, I have to rotate it like this. We can leave it here. And we actually get the nice reflection in the window, which is cool. Alright, I'm going to lock this so it doesn't accidentally get moved. I'm going to do the same for the actual room. Let's import our piano. All right, so it has been imported, and let's just bring it in. Now, this pivot point is actually all the way at the bottom. That is really useful because we basically know that anywhere we put the pivot point, it is actually firmly planted on the ground. And this also is highly reflective. If you can't tell, I love reflective surfaces in 3D graphics. It's just cool to me. I don't know. All right. Now, because of the weird shape of the room, it makes placement of these objects kind of tricky, but we can leave that there. I'll put this guy a little bit smaller. And now let's bring in our Mona Lisa. This should be like split second. There we go. And unlike the real Mona Lisa, this one is humongous as well. So let's place it somewhere. Something cool, though, is that by default, as you saw, I'm not holding down any of the mouse buttons. When you click on an object to bring it in, it is always bound to your mouse cursor. If you hold Shift while you're doing that, it will automatically snap to the surface. So right now, it's snapping to the ground, but if I move it inside, you'll see that it'll snap to whatever surface it's touching. This is something that's only available when you first drag in an object, but it's functionality that will be added for just when you're generally moving objects. It just makes it really easy. I'm going to put it right here and shrink this down significantly. Now, because the walls are rounded, it's a little strange, a little awkward to place it, but that's good enough. And just for fun, let's just make sure the metal frame is nice and shiny. There we go. All right, and something I don't think we have here is ambient occlusion, and that is why it looks very flat. So let's just increase this, and you can see already around these edges, it just makes it feel so much more tangible. Tangible is the key word, I think, when designing 3D scenes. You want to make it feel like you can actually touch it, and you know, make it feel like a solid object as opposed to just a collection of triangles with nothing inside. All right, that looks pretty good. And okay, so those are the objects. Let's turn on reflections for this. Actually, that's a little too much. And let's adjust the time of day again. This also looks very good. Or we can make it nighttime and see how that looks. With it nighttime, I actually think these panel lights look pretty good. What I'm going to do is, so these can actually be photographed, is make their size about the same as these actual windows. So if I rotate this, I can place it roughly in the frames, and we have this cool matrix look of like this grid of panels. It's not super precise, but it looks pretty cool. I actually like that a lot. Yeah, that's awesome. Something that's also missing is multi-select. So in the future, I would really like to be able to just select all three of these, duplicate them, and rotate them for on this side. Again, that's just something coming in a future release, because there are other things that need prioritizing right now. Also, a grouping of objects is going to be incredibly helpful. That should be coming soon. Let's place this over here. Oh, I didn't realize all of these have Ray Trace GI turned on. That's definitely contributing to the very blown out look of the room right now. But I think that's okay. I might switch those to something either different or off entirely. And one more time. Over here. Cool. This is very, very bright. It actually looks really cool. I'm going to turn off reflections for the lower one, or ray tracing for the lower ones. And let's just see what happens if I turn them off entirely, because I'm not really sure what is contributing to the scene. Okay, so it's around it, like in the background. I do think that's important. And I'm going to make every other one just a little bit cooler and then warmer. And of course I'm referring to the temperature of the light color, not the actual heat. Hope that's clear. Just so there's some subtle variation. That looks really interesting. And if we do make it daytime, it also looks pretty good still. But I think having the ambient darkness adds a lot to it. Cool. The one thing about the global illumination is that it kind of washes out the rest of your scene, because it's being like entrenched, is that a word? In light from all angles. So these look very faded now. So I'm going to turn it off for these. Cool. Now what we can do is put a light bulb all the way at the top. Here, let's just see what that does. I'm going to open up the window so we can see what our camera sees. Let's do something like that. I actually would like to move the statue so it's more in the foreground. I think that'd be interesting. So it's more on this side. And we can definitely add some light to this side as well. Cool, so we have that, and I'm going to add a light bulb at the top on the outside, whatever that means for this object that doesn't really have an interior or exterior. All right. It's like being hidden by something, so I can't select it. Is that it? No, it's the panel light. There we go. So you'll see, because I have volumetric lights turned on, you can actually see the light, like physicality, interacting with the scene. Obviously, it's way too much right now, and I find that point lights, or light bulbs, have that, you know, turned on a little too much. But you can see, definitely adds to the scene. Even if the scene's not being illuminated by the light, having the just the rays coming through is really cool. All right, now I'm going to put a light. Now this is the I guess the movie magic part of it. I'm going to put a light on the outside that's going to shine through the walls onto the backside, or I guess what's visible, of this statue. And I'm going to use a box light because it stands at around the right height already. And let's see what angle needs. You can try like that. We don't have that much warm lights, I feel like. The entire scene has like an orangey tint to it, but it's not really... I'm not really sure. We can experiment with that. And if we turn down the exposure and turn up the bloom, that's a way to kind of... It's very subtle in the camera view. Something we haven't touched yet is the tone mapping, because right now, and I think that's partially why the bloom is more intense in the editor view, is because it's inconsistent in the way the cameras are being rendered. But if we switch to a tone mapping setting, now we adjust the bloom, it is much more consistent. That is very good to know. What it also means that because things are darker or more muted, you might want to increase the, or maybe not, increase the exposure and then adjust the bloom from there. It's a personal preference thing. There's no right answer, obviously. But you should keep in mind that if there's something inconsistent, that's what tone mapping is for, is to apply a consistent conversion of color across multiple camera views. Interesting. This looks very cool. So you see already I can see from outside the scene. That's not what we want. So I'm going to do something like this. And here we have this very interesting scene. All these people are laughing, talking about something. Probably laughing about how, oh, look, we all have the same face. Isn't that interesting? All right, it's stupid. I'm going to take a snapshot, and I'm going to turn on the virtual camera once again, because there's so much to look at from all angles. I think that would really help. All right, so here we have the virtual camera set up, and now we can adjust it. Now, what's interesting is that without tone mapping on, I guess this shows the real importance of it, the image that's being sent to the iPad, which I know you can't really see on camera, is significantly darker than both the editor view and the camera view. So if I turn this off, or to neutral, now it's significantly lighter. In any case, tone mapping is very important to ensure a consistent look across all of your devices and displays. So I'm going to see here where the camera is. And let's move over a little bit. All right. And I'm going to turn down focus distance to auto. And now let's click calibrate. So I'm going to now move this camera around. Oh. So when it's in calibration mode, I can either reposition my physical device, so around my space, or, of course, I can reposition the starting position of the camera. So I'm going to make it face here. There we go. So on this angle, there's not, from this side, it looks significantly worse just because there isn't that direct light on it, or there isn't the light sources visible in the frame. But it looks really great from this angle. And so if I wanted to animate and record the camera motion, I could, of course, find a comfortable position to do this, hit record, and get an interesting, quick little movie, I suppose, of me looking around the scene. All right, I'm going to exit out of this, turn this off, and now let's work with the animation. So if I go down here and zoom in, or zoom out, I click play, we have our motion there. Now, I'm going to attempt to animate the keyframes of the focus distance. I suppose it's on auto right now, which is fine. So let me try animating the focal length and seeing what we can do with that. So I'm going to convert this to keyframes so we can actually scrub through, which makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on and where. Set the focal length at start and move this over here and actually have it zoom in quite a bit. Now at this point, obviously, we want to be able to see everyone in frame, so I'm going to zoom out. And in practice, there's a good chance it's going to look kind of silly focusing and zooming in and out frequently, but it's definitely a good experiment in working with the system. All right, I'm going to add another keyframe there of the same one, so then we shift over to, let's say, him. At this point, I'm going to add a keyframe here. Now, what's important to know is that if I add a keyframe of the camera's position using this button, it will add one at this point right here. So what that means is that if I then move the camera like this, add a keyframe, there's going to be a jump, an instant jump in when playing back the animation, which obviously is not ideal. So what it looks like happened is that my camera died, which I know doesn't make for a good video. So I'm going to turn that off, really quickly finish what I'm talking about here, and then we'll end the video. So if I scrub through and I click play, now we have our focal length zooming in as we move the camera around. So it's really great for just kind of seeing the way a space is going to look on camera. And I highly suggest looking through Sketchfab for architectural models and 3D scans of real places, because it's just a lot of fun to work with, and especially if you add other objects inside. So if you get like a scan of a museum and add a bunch of people, or put paintings on the walls that shouldn't be there and things like that, you can create some very interesting visuals. So with that, thank you very much for watching. I hope this was interesting, or maybe even informative in some way, or at least entertaining. Thank you very much.